In ancient Egypt, people enjoyed themselves just as much as we do. You are about to learn a lot of new things. We are used to thinking of ancient Egypt as a civilization obsessed with the afterlife. Majestic pyramids, mummies, complex funeral rituals. All this creates an image of a gloomy and strict society. But their world was filled with laughter, music, excitement, and celebrations that could last for weeks. In the shadow of giant monuments, a vibrant and rich life was bustling, full of entertainment that we are only beginning to learn about. Watch the video to the end to find out how a board game could determine your fate in the afterlife, and why the acrobatic feats of the Egyptians still amaze modern gymnasts. What if I told you that the biggest parties in ancient Egypt weren't for the living? Great festivals weren't just entertainment, but a crucial part of social and religious life. They blurred the lines between humans and gods, between everyday life and sacred time. One of the most significant was the Opet festival in Thebes. This grand procession lasted several weeks. Statues of the gods Amun, Mut, and Khonsu were transported from the Karnak temple to the Luxor temple. Huge crowds gathered along the entire route of the procession. The streets were filled with music, dancing, and singing. It was a time of universal rejoicing, when even the poorest could feel part of something great. Another important event was the beautiful Festival of the Valley. During this festival, families crossed to the west bank of the Nile to spend time in the tombs of their ancestors. They brought food and drink, setting up veritable feasts next to the deceased. This was not a somber ritual. The Egyptians believed that the spirits of their ancestors could join in the festivities. Thus, the festival united the world of the living and the world of spirits in shared joy. There were also agricultural festivals, such as the Harvest Festival, dedicated to Min, the god of abundance. It was accompanied by sports competitions, music, and abundant feasts. It was a way of thanking the gods for the generosity of the earth. During such festivals, social boundaries were relaxed. Commoners and nobles could celebrate together. This strengthened the sense of unity and community throughout Egyptian society. The rulers actively supported and financed these celebrations. They understood that shared joy was a powerful tool for maintaining stability and loyalty among the people. Generous distributions of food and beer were an integral part of any major festival. For the average Egyptian, these days were a long-awaited respite from hard work. It was an opportunity to relax, have fun, and touch the world of the gods. Festivals were bright flashes of joy in the measured flow of Egyptian life. In essence, these events were the foundation on which the entire civilization was built. They united religion, politics, and everyday life into a single whole. It was in this unity that the secret of ancient Egypt's longevity lay. We would be very interested to hear your opinion. What do you think about the tradition of holding feasts at the resting places of ancestors? Write about it in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about the game played by pharaohs and ordinary craftsmen? Senet was not just a board game, it was a metaphor for the soul's journey to the afterlife. It was the most popular entertainment in ancient Egypt for nearly 3 millennia. The playing field was a board of 30 squares arranged in 3 rows of 10. Each of the 2 players had their own set of pieces. The goal of the game was to move all of your pieces across the board and be the first to remove them from the field. The movement of the pieces was determined by throwing special sticks or dice. Some squares on the board were special. They could either help the player or create obstacles for them by returning the piece back. Senet required not only luck, but also strategic thinking. Players had to decide which piece to move, how to block their opponent, and how to avoid traps. This made each game tense and unpredictable. Starting in the New Kingdom era, the game took on a deep religious meaning. The Senet board came to symbolize Duat, the afterlife. The players' pieces were identified with their soul, striving for eternal life. The last 5 squares on the board had special hieroglyphs denoting the stages of the soul's union with the gods. Successful completion of the game symbolized passing all trials and gaining immortality. Failure could mean eternal wandering in darkness. Depictions of Senet are often found in tombs. The deceased was depicted playing against an invisible opponent, symbolizing fate. Victory in this posthumous game guaranteed a peaceful rebirth. Senet boards have been found in all social classes. Pharaohs such as Tutankhamun had luxurious game sets made of ebony and ivory. Ordinary people simply drew a board on a stone or piece of clay. The game was so popular that it spread beyond Egypt. Game sets have been found in Nubia, the Levant, and even Cyprus. Senet became one of the first cultural exports in history. This game is a unique example of how entertainment can be inextricably linked to the deepest beliefs. For the Egyptians, it was not just a way to pass the evening, but a rehearsal for the most important journey of their lives. Do you think modern games can carry the same deep symbolism? But board games were just one type of leisure activity that required calm and concentration. Are you ready to find out which acrobatic tricks depicted in ancient frescoes could challenge even modern Olympic champions? What you have never seen before is hidden on the walls of ancient tombs. Egyptian art has brought us amazing scenes of professional artists performing. Acrobatics and dancing were an important part of any celebration or feast among the nobility. In the frescoes, we see young women performing incredibly complex acrobatic feats. They bend backward to form a perfect bridge or do somersaults with astonishing ease. Their level of flexibility and skill was extremely high. Pair and group performances were especially popular. Acrobats created complex living pyramids, supporting each other. These acts required perfect coordination, strength, and complete trust in one's partner. Some images show tricks that seem almost impossible. For example, one girl stands on her hands while another balances on her feet. This speaks to the highest level of professional training. Juggling was also a popular entertainment. Artists tossed several balls into the air at the same time. Judging by the paintings, they used 3 to 6 balls, which is a difficult task even for modern jugglers. Dancing was an integral part of Egyptian culture. There were ritual dances in temples, military dances performed by soldiers, and, of course, entertainment dances at banquets. Each type of dance had its own unique movements and meaning. Dancers at banquets often performed in semi-transparent clothing that emphasized the grace of their movements. Their dances were fluid and sensual. They moved to the accompaniment of musical instruments, creating a mesmerizing spectacle. Musicians and dancers often formed traveling troupes. They traveled from city to city, performing at festivals and in the homes of wealthy nobles. Being a professional artist was a respected profession. Interestingly, performers from other countries often took part in these performances. Nubian dancers were particularly popular due to their exotic appearance and unique style. This brought diversity to Egyptian art. These images give us a unique glimpse into the world of ancient Egyptian show business. They show that the desire for spectacle and admiration for human dexterity and beauty were characteristic of people thousands of years ago. The art of entertainment was honed to perfection. What if I showed you a time machine that could transport you to a feast with the pharaoh? Music was a constant companion to the Egyptians throughout their lives. It was played in temples, palaces, in the fields during work, and in homes during leisure time. The Egyptians used a wide range of musical instruments. One of the most popular was the harp. There were both large floor harps for palace orchestras and small hand harps that could be carried around. Stringed instruments such as the lute, which came to Egypt from the Middle East, were also popular. Wind instruments included various types of flutes and oboes. Their delicate melodies created a peaceful atmosphere. Percussion instruments were an essential part of celebrations and military campaigns. Large drums, tambourines, and rattles set the rhythm for dances and processions. The music could be slow and melancholic or fast and lively. The profession of musician was highly respected. Blind harpists were especially valued. It was believed that their disability sharpened their hearing and allowed them to create particularly beautiful music. Music played an important role in religious ceremonies. It was believed that certain melodies and rhythms could appease the gods. Priestesses in temples were often skilled singers and musicians. It was customary for noble households to have their own musicians. They entertained the hosts and guests during feasts. Having a good orchestra was a sign of high status and wealth. Even ordinary workers sang while they worked. Rhythmic songs helped them coordinate their efforts when performing heavy labor. Music made monotonous work easier and lifted their spirits. Unfortunately, we do not know exactly what ancient Egyptian music sounded like, as they did not invent a system of musical notation. We can only guess at his character from images of musicians and preserved instruments, but its importance in the life of society was enormous. Music was a universal language that united all Egyptians, from the pharaoh to the common peasant. It was an integral part of their world, filling it with harmony and emotion. Can you imagine the modern world without music? Music and dance were the preserve of large gatherings and celebrations. But what did the Egyptians do on quiet family evenings? In the next chapter, you will learn what stories captivated their imagination. In a world where literacy was a privilege of the few, oral storytelling was the main source of entertainment and knowledge. Professional storytellers were highly respected. They were the keepers of myths, legends, and historical traditions. In the evenings, families would gather to listen to fascinating stories. Storytellers transported their listeners to a world of gods and heroes, distant lands, and magical creatures. It was similar to modern radio or podcasts, only performed live. One of the most popular genres was fairy tales. For example, the tale of the shipwrecked sailor tells the story of a sailor who finds himself on a magical island after a storm. There he meets a giant talking snake who predicts his future. Another well-known story is The Tale of Two Brothers. It is a complex story about loyalty, betrayal, and magical transformations, reminiscent of the plots of many European folktales. Such stories not only entertained, but also taught moral principles. There were also stories based on real or pseudo-real events. For example, The Tale of Senet tells the story of a courtier who flees Egypt and lives an adventurous life in Asia. This text was considered a classic of Egyptian literature. Storytellers were true masters of their craft. They changed their voices and used gestures and facial expressions to make the narrative more vivid and emotional. A good storyteller could hold the audience's attention for several hours. Stories were passed down from generation to generation. They were a living part of the culture, constantly changing and enriched with new details. It was a way to maintain a connection with the past and pass on the experiences of ancestors. Are you ready for the shocking truth about physical training in ancient times? Sports in ancient Egypt were not just entertainment, but an important part of military training and religious rituals. Physical strength and agility were highly valued in society. One of the most popular sports was wrestling. The walls of the tombs in Beni Hassan depict hundreds of pairs of wrestlers demonstrating a variety of techniques: grappling, throws, holds. Egyptian athletes had a rich arsenal of skills. Wrestling competitions were often held during festivals. The winners enjoyed great honor and respect. Wrestling developed strength, endurance, and tactical thinking. Another important sport was archery. It was both a military art and a sporting discipline. Competitions were held for accuracy and shooting at targets. Pharaohs were often depicted as skilled archers. It was believed that the ruler's accuracy symbolized his ability to defeat Egypt's enemies. Archery skills were a must for any noble young man. Javelin throwing competitions were also popular. Athletes competed in distance and accuracy. This skill was necessary for hunting and combat. There were also team ball games, although their rules have not survived. In the images, we see players passing a ball made of leather and stuffed with reeds or hair. These games probably developed coordination and team spirit. Swimming was also a common activity. The Nile provided excellent opportunities for this. The ability to swim was a vital skill. Interestingly, women also participated in some sports, such as acrobatics and possibly ball games. Egyptian society was more open in this regard than many other ancient cultures. Physical culture was accessible to many. Sports competitions were spectacular events that attracted large audiences. They gave young people the opportunity to demonstrate their prowess. It was a celebration of the strength and beauty of the human body. Which of these ancient sports do you find most spectacular? Strength and agility were important not only on land. In the next chapter, we will see how Egypt's main artery, the Nile River, became an arena for recreation and entertainment. Life in Egypt was unthinkable without the Nile. The great river was not only a source of prosperity, but also a huge playground for recreation and entertainment. The water attracted Egyptians of all classes. For the nobility, trips on the Nile were organized on luxurious pleasure boats. These ships were beautifully decorated and equipped with awnings for protection from the sun. Music played on board, and exquisite dishes and drinks were served. Such river trips were a popular way to spend time with family and friends. They allowed people to enjoy the coolness and picturesque views of the banks. It was a peaceful and aristocratic form of recreation. Ordinary Egyptians also enjoyed spending time on the water. They used small papyrus boats to sail on the river and its tributaries. It was an opportunity to take a break from the heat and everyday worries. Fishing was not only a trade, but also a popular pastime. Noble Egyptians were often depicted in frescoes with a fishing rod or harpoon in their hands. It was an exciting and meditative form of leisure. Hunting in the marshy Nile thickets was another favorite pastime of the aristocracy. They hunted waterfowl using throwing sticks similar to boomerangs. Such outings were quite an event, requiring preparation. Rowing competitions were also common. Teams competed in speed and coordination. These races probably attracted many spectators and were accompanied by exciting bets. Fun competitions were also held on the river. In some images, we see boatmen trying to push each other into the water with long poles. It was a fun and safe pastime. Swimming in the clear backwaters of the Nile was a natural way to cool off in the hot climate. Egyptians were good swimmers from an early age. Water was their native element. The river was the center of social life. People met on its banks, exchanged news, and made deals. The Nile witnessed the entire life of the Egyptians, from birth to their final journey. Thus, the Nile was not just a waterway, it was the heart of Egyptian civilization, providing not only food but also joy. The river was inseparable from their idea of happiness. Banquets and feasts were one of the main social entertainments in ancient Egypt. It was not just a meal, but a complex social event with its own rules and rituals. The opportunity to eat and drink well in pleasant company was highly valued. A huge variety of dishes were served at feasts for the nobility. The tables were laden with roasted meat, poultry, fish, fresh vegetables, and fruit. Sweet dates and figs were considered a special delicacy. Bread and beer were the basis of the diet and a mandatory attribute of any feast. There were many varieties of bread of different shapes and dozens of types of beer. Wine was usually a drink for wealthier people. Guests were seated according to their social status. The most honorable places were closer to the host. Table etiquette was very important. The feast was accompanied by entertainment. Musicians, dancers, and acrobats performed for the guests throughout the evening. This created a festive and relaxed atmosphere. Guests were offered flower garlands and scented cones. These cones, made of fat and incense, were placed on the head. Gradually melting from body heat, they exuded a pleasant aroma. Conversation and the exchange of news were an important part of the banquet. It was an opportunity to discuss business, gossip, and strengthen social ties. Feasts served as an important tool for informal communication. For the Egyptians, sharing a meal also had a sacred meaning. They believed that food and drink could be offerings to the gods and deceased ancestors. Therefore, lavish feasts were part of many religious holidays. Ordinary Egyptians, of course, could not afford such luxury, but they also valued the opportunity to gather with family and neighbors for a modest meal. Any occasion, whether a wedding or the birth of a child, was celebrated with a communal feast. The art of entertaining guests and hosting feasts was an important part of Egyptian culture. It was a manifestation of hospitality and joie de vivre. Food was not just fuel for them, but a source of pleasure and communication. In the hot and arid climate of Egypt, a garden was a symbol of luxury and bliss. Wealthy Egyptians invested a lot of effort and money in creating shady gardens around their villas. These gardens were not for agriculture, but exclusively for relaxation and enjoyment. The central element of such a garden was usually a rectangular pond. Ornamental fish were bred in the pond and lotuses were grown. The water was not only pleasing to the eye, but also created a cool microclimate. A variety of trees were planted around the pond. Palm trees and sycamores provided dense shade. Fruit trees, such as figs and pomegranates, provided not only shade but also delicious fruit. The paths in the garden were covered with clean sand or gravel. Benches and gazebos covered with grapevines were set up in shady corners. These were ideal places for secluded relaxation or leisurely conversation. The gardens were filled with the scent of flowers. The Egyptians loved lotuses, poppies, and cornflowers. Flowers were used not only to decorate the garden, but also to make garlands and bouquets. Caring for such a garden required the constant labor of gardeners. The plants had to be watered regularly using water from ponds or canals. It was difficult and painstaking work. Despite the abundance of grand celebrations and feasts, the Egyptians spent most of their time with their families. Everyday leisure consisted of simple and accessible entertainment. It was these little things that formed the basis of their lives. One of their favorite pastimes was simple conversation. After a hard day's work, families would gather on the roofs of their houses to enjoy the cool evening air. They would discuss the events of the day, tell stories, and share plans. Games were popular among people of all ages. In addition to the complex Senet, there were many simpler games. For example, the game Snake, Mehen, where pieces moved along a spiral board. Games requiring dexterity were also common. The discovery of small clay and stone balls suggests that the Egyptians may have played games similar to modern marbles or pétanque. These did not require complex equipment. Various toys were used for entertainment. Wooden figures with moving parts have been found. For example, a figure depicting a man grinding grain was set in motion with a string. These simple pleasures were part of everyday life. They show us the Egyptians not as pyramid builders, but as ordinary people. People who knew how to find happiness in every day. We have taken a journey into the world of entertainment in ancient Egypt and seen how vibrant and diverse life was in this civilization. From sacred festivals to quiet family evenings, from exciting board games to graceful dances, the Egyptians knew how to enjoy life and loved to do so. Their culture was filled not only with concerns about eternity, but also with a desire for happiness in the here and now. They left us not only grandiose monuments, but also evidence of their love of life. By studying their leisure activities, we can better understand them, seeing them not as distant shadows of the past, but as people with the same aspirations and desires as us. Their world was much richer and more multifaceted than is commonly believed. Which of the ancient Egyptians' pastimes did you find most interesting? Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on new research into the mysteries of the past.